Thank you, Tyler. Actually, what we've done is we've disproven some of the basic areas of Einstein's theory of relativity and come up with what amounts to a total unified field theory, the grand unified field theory, which is commonly called the gut. So we've got a new gut that fits in. I haven't developed all of it myself. I've just kind of put together some ideas from a couple of mathematicians and physicists that have done work in this area. And it's kind of interesting, some of the things. What we've done is put about one chapter in the shape power book, which is out there on the table, which describes the field theory itself. And it's kind of interesting if you've got a mathematical background. The rest of the book is quite easy to understand. So if you don't have mathematics, you don't have to go through and try and figure out what we're talking about. The rest of the book itself talks for it. That's the crass commercial message, as Gordon Liddy would say. We're going to talk about free energy and anti-gravity and show how they correlate. Next slide, please. This is a fairly precise definition. It's I define shape power as the phenomena where physical shapes convert the undifferentiated universal ether into electricity, magnetism, and nuclear forces. Now, another name for the ether is zero-point energy. What happened is back in the last part of the last century, they did the Michelson-Morley experiment, and the physicists and the electrical engineers and the scientists generally threw out the ether as a medium for which the various forces move through. This paper is going to go through and summarize some of the discoveries that we've made and show how shape relates to free energy and anti-gravity. Next slide, please. This is a brief summary of what the ether is and some of the discussions we've had. This goes through to talk about the speed of light. One of the things that the early experimenters did was show that, or they thought that the speed of light was a constant, and all the experiments they did seem to show this. I have, in fact, seen demonstrations of 5 times the speed of light in the laboratory, generated and well documented and demonstrated before several numbers of scientists at the Tesla conference. One of the things that the unified field theory does is tie together the ether as a superfluid with little and no viscosity. And modern physics is mostly focused on this area of the Michelson-Morley and has ignored things that have happened since, where they actually showed that there were an ether drift and also an ether effect with respect to elevation and time of year and time during the solar sunspot cycle. Next slide, please. Another experimenter that you've probably seen if you get into some of this research is a man named John Keeley. He died toward the end of the last century, but actually demonstrated a number of free energy and anti-gravity phenomena, and he's kind of looked at as one of the wild and crazy icons of mad scientistville. The other aspect of common space energy, some of the other names that have been applied to it are from the Hindu yogi literature. You have prana. Of course, we've got the ether. I'd prefer the AE spelling. Wilhelm Reich with his orgone energy, which is quite well known as far as in some of the New Age and New Science circles. And of course, from the ancient Chinese medicine and also from the martial arts, we see the concept of qi. And in the New Science circles, the ether has kind of been replaced with the term zero-point energy. Next slide, please. So the basic definition that I've been working with and that we've kind of broken down as far as the mathematics go is it's a superfluidic medium that pervades all space, and it's the basic building block of all matter. And we've gotten into actually finding some really good research that's going on out there to recharacterize the subatomic forces and show that they're really based on vortexual phenomena that's self-sustained in the ether. It's a medium which is controllable by the mind. This has to do if you go into martial arts and some of these areas where they actually have learned a great deal of control of the chi force. It's also a force that can be manipulated by shape, which is what I'm going to concentrate on this topic. Next slide. Magnetism, everybody knows pretty much what magnetism is. It's that magnetic field that the Earth has. It's also a magnetic field that exists around people. We're also heard the term electromagnetic field, which is the combination of electricity and magnetism in the phenomena called light, and of course radio waves and microwaves, things like that. Also infrared and ultraviolet. They're all part of the electromagnetic spectrum. What we've really discovered is that magnetic fields are the result of spiral or vortical flows within the zero-point or ether field. Next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about pyramid energy. This happens to be a pictorial of the forces that exist within a pyramid. Next slide. For those of you that have gotten into some of this science, there's some interesting effects with respect to pyramids. One of the things they've found is that pyramids seem to preserve food. They also enhance the meditation process, which is probably a function of more energy that the pyramid collects. They've done a lot of research to show that it promotes healing, which of course is another energetic effect. And one of the most interesting things which triggered the basic discovery of the shape power effect was that the only thing you need to generate the pyramid energy are the edges of the pyramid all the way around. You don't need the sides, you don't need solid sides. In fact, it seems to work better if you've got holes in it or if you've got open sides. No, it'll work on almost any shaped pyramid will generate it. There are some that are more effective than others. Also generates static electricity. We've proven this in the lab. Generates a magnetic field, and we've been able to prove this also in the lab. Next slide, please. This is a stylized view of the forces within the pyramid. It turns out that there's a mild magnetic field that gets created here at the four corners of the base, also up here, and that because of this field creating a pull on the zero-point energy field, there's a force here, but it happens to be a negative aspect, not negative in the sense of negativity, but negative polarity to these right down here. And because of this collection activity, there's actually some static forces and things that come off the peak of the pyramid. Next slide. Next slide. This is the physics of shape power. Tom Bearden's done a lot of research, talked about scalars, and people are starting using the term, but very few really understand what it means. But basically, if you've got an electromagnetic wave, and you take two of them, one of them which is 180 degrees out of phase with the other one, and you add them together, you'd think you'd get zero. And in fact, from an electromagnetic standpoint, you do get zero. But what happens is you get what is called a scalar field, which means that it has no vectorial force in the electromagnetic spectrum. There's still force there, but it doesn't register in the electromagnetic area. Now, this particular wave will go through any linear medium, but it's also retarded by nonlinear mediums, such as our nervous system. This is why people are sensitive to things like pyramid energy. They can feel the nonlinear effects that the energy does reacting with their nervous system. Now, a nonlinear medium, like your nervous system or like some other things in nature, what it does is it converts it back into electromagnetics. Now, the way it does that, this is, again, a stylized view of it. If you take two of these scalar waves, beat them together 180 degrees out of phase, you can create an electromagnetic wave. And this is, in fact, what they were talking about in the HARP film that you saw. What they're capable of doing is projecting that energy field, not just up into the ionosphere. They can project that field anywhere on the planet based on phased array radar principles. Next slide, please. This is just a stylized view of a very complex atom. Obviously not hydrogen, where you've got a lot of subatomic particles in there. When you've got many subatomic particles, each particle is interacting with the ether itself. And what happens is ether is flowing in and out of these subatomic particles. So what happens is the atom itself has a lot of lines of force going in and out of it due to the electromagnetics. Next slide. If you build this up and say we have two atoms, depending on the polarity of the particles, you will get a connection here between the flow of the ether, and on some of them where these flows, since these flows are basically vortical going into the nucleus, you will get a repulsion. So you get several different kinds of effects going on here. This obviously would be two atoms that are connecting together electrically. Next slide. If you take a whole bunch of atoms, which most everything is, and put them all in a line, you end up with a lot of force coming off the edges, and more or less the rest of it that's linear is contained within the connection of the atoms themselves. Next slide. So what triggered all this was going back and rereading a lot of the pyramid energy research. One of the researchers had actually claimed that there was a magnetic field created at the bases, which I had just mentioned. And I thought, well, how can this happen? So what I did was I drew two lines on a piece of paper, and I have a very good friend who's a clairvoyant, can see these energies, and I asked him what happened when this occurs. And the clairvoyant says, well, the energy is kind of fuzzy out here, but it gets really intense down here where these two lines intersect. Now, all I had done was draw two lines on a piece of paper. Next slide. So I said, well, if those lines are coming in, then maybe there's a vortex created there, which means there might be a magnetic field. Maybe this pyramid energy book was correct. So I have a friend named Joe Parr who's got a very sensitive magnetic field meter, and I asked him if he'd run a quick experiment because I didn't have a magnetometer at that time. And what he did was he took 9 wooden chopsticks, stuck them in a styrofoam ball, and he ended up creating a very mild magnetic field of about 1 inch from the ball. There was 1 milligauss of magnetic field. Away from the ball, there was nothing. Next. So what I did was I built up a magnetometer, being a kind of a poor researcher in the sense that no big corporation or company or university is paying for all my research. I have to build out of my own equipment. And the net result of this is I get some really good experience, but it does take a little more time to do basic experiments. So I built a fluxgate magnetometer, which is a highly sensitive device for measuring magnetic fields. And I took a fiberglass pyramid with copper on it and took a measurement of the reading. I was getting 310 gammas. Now, gamma happens to be about 10 to the minus fifth of a Gauss, and within the Earth's magnetic field, in other words, this field that we all live and move and everything in, is about a half a Gauss. So the Earth's magnetic field is 50,000 gammas. So my little fluxgate magnetometer would measure down in the gamma region. And what I discovered was that this copper pyramid would have 310 gammas. If I took a stack of pyramids and drew lines on them, which enhanced the magnetic effect, I got 194 gammas, and a pyramid without any lines got nothing. Next slide. He's sleeping back there again. Next slide. Remember, I mentioned there was some energy coming off the top of the pyramid. I ran across this photograph. It was taken by Marion Dean, or was given to Marion Dean Hardy, and it was a picture of a pyramid with a Tesla coil mounted inside of it. And the most interesting aspect of it is this double helix spiral of energy that's popping off the top of the pyramid. Now, if, this fits exactly in with the theory and everything that we've been going on. This picture was a courtesy from Vanguard Sciences, which does the Keeley net. The Tesla coil, unknown voltage, it was a fiberglass, not a fiberglass, a Lexan pyramid with a little copper pyramid sitting on top of it. And I think they took a double exposure over about 1 minute. Next slide. Another aspect of energy effects with respect to pyramids is a researcher named Les Brown who did a lot of research with pyramids and with crystals and things like that. And he built a very large pyramid. It was probably about as wide as this room. A very large scale pyramid made out of wood. and for some reason he got the inspiration. He took a piece of stove wire, which you know has a number of strands in it. It'll hold a lot of current. And he built a spiral and hung it up here in the top of the inside of the pyramid. And then he went down here and built this little spiral on a piece of 1/4-inch plywood and stapled it into the floor and grounded it. And then he went up here and took a piece of wool thread, lamb's wool, and hooked it on here and walked it down and went to hook it onto here. And the voltage from the thing, or whatever energy it was so intense that it threw him clear across the room into the side of the pyramid, and you know, he got a little bit of damage from that physically, and it scared him so bad that he took the whole thing apart and wouldn't do any more research with it. But you know, assuming this is true, he was generating a huge amount of local force with the thing. Next slide. This is an example of a shape power device. What it is, it's just a piece of paper, and you can create this particular pattern on a computer. And what it is just a bunch of spiral lines that spiral into the center with a you know, no printing on that part of it. And I asked my clairvoyant friend, you know, what's happening with this thing? And the clairvoyant looked at it and says, well, out of this side, there's energy flowing into it, which is kind of shown here. And out the back was a vortexual field that was about the same width as the spirals. Next slide. So I said, well, you know, what's happening here is this thing, you know, is focalizing the ether or local forces. So I added another one of these lenses on it, and what it did was it took all the energy that was here and intensified it and made the beam a little bit longer. And I added another one and intensified the beam and made it longer still. Kind of an interesting effect. Next slide. Another aspect of free energy that was created, this came from the book The Circle Makers by Andrew Collins. Somebody had bought my book Shape Power and thought that this thing seemed to correlate it with it. What it was Andrew Collins, some friend of his named Graham Phillip, got a psychic impression of a pattern. They had been studying mazes and things. You know, England has a lot of these mazes in different parts of the country. And he got this impression of this particular maze, and so they drew this thing, a big one, so that it would on butcher paper on the floor of their apartment. And one of the things that happened was that when they got this thing built and started walking around it, it threw the circuit breakers in the apartment itself. And the other thing that happened was a large burn spot appeared right here at the center of the maze, and they had a stylized picture of it in the book. Next slide. This is just an example of shape power. Schauberger built a lot of devices using water and water channels, and of course, if you've done any research in this area, this is back in the area of the last World War II, and Schauberger was captured or forced to work for the Nazis in a laboratory. And these are two examples of anti-gravity devices, look like flying saucers, that he built and actually demonstrated for the Third Reich. This particular device here was a Zuckfendel, which purportedly generated 50,000 watts of electrical power and 50,000 watts of some other kind of power that they couldn't really characterize. It would light up light bulbs, but it would run cold instead of hot like normal electricity. This is the picture of the generator here. This was used to spin up a turbine in here that forced energy to go through in a spiral pathway. And supposedly these things here forced air, and one of them apparently used sand and forced it through a spiral pathway within this particular thing that looks like a flying saucer. Next slide. So a brief summary of shape power effects. We've been able to create both magnetic and electrostatic forces with shape. The pyramid causes dehydration and other kinds of effects, and it also creates a mild magnetic field. And of course, the Eros maze points to possible ways of generating some power from the thing, or at least we've seen some energetic effects. Next slide. Shape is an energy sensor. A friend of mine named Joe Parr contacted me a number of years, about 4 years ago, and he had seen one of my papers that I'd done at the Tesla conference where I had used a piezoelectric to detect gravitational waves. Piezoelectric, it turns out, is a nonlinear medium, and it will convert this zero-point energy or ether into electrostatic forces. And he sent me this letter and said, I've been there and done that. And so I said, well, maybe this guy has gone beyond where he's done that, where I've done that, you know. And so we carried on a correspondence. He didn't like to talk on the phone, and Joe's kind of an interesting character. But so we sent letters back and forth, and I have a sheaf of correspondence from him. It took me about 3 years to understand what Joe had done, which was pretty fantastic. One of his first experiments was with a pyramid, using it as a basic sensor. And what he did was he had a capacitor here that was a blown capacitor, and then while it was blown, he put a little battery across it and ran it through a couple of resistors and to a chart recorder. And then he just took readings over long periods of time of what this little sensor was doing. This is essentially a nonlinear detector. The other thing he did was he found that 500 or 1,000 hertz across this pyramid as a field, electromagnetic field, would start this thing recording weird events. And these events happen more often during certain times of the year. Next slide. So from this, he developed a new device. But one of the reasons he went into this was that Joe has a very rare disease called Marfan's. And Joe, this disease is very debilitating. It deteriorates the nervous system and the skeletal structure, et cetera. And most people with Marfan's don't live much beyond about 35 or 40. But Joe is an electrical engineer, and he was working over in Saudi Arabia, and he heard this stuff about pyramid energy. This is how he got into that first experiment. And Joe said, well, you know, if there's something to this, maybe it'll help my Marfan's. So he, on a trip back to the United States, stopped in Cairo and went over, and he stayed 24 hours inside the Great Pyramid and 24 hours on top. And when he got back to the United States, the Marfan's went into remission. And this totally blew the doctors away. They couldn't understand it. So Joe started studying this stuff, and that's how I developed the first experiment. And then this second one here is a follow-on. Balsically, this is his centrifuge. What it is a motor up here that drives a balsa shaft that has a couple of pyramids epoxied on the ends of it, and these pyramids go in and out of some magnets that are inside, and this is all a hermetically sealed chamber. One of the things that happened is that during the same times of the year that he was getting weird effects with the little pyramid sensor, some of these pyramids would go ripping off the end, and he was getting up to 2,000 pounds of force off of a very small pyramid, 8-gram pyramid, which amounts to about 113,000 times increase in kinetic energy. Next slide. So this experiment was very hard to control, so he developed a new experiment, which is basically a simple little high-speed DC motor with a shaft coming out of it, and he's got a little wheel here, which consists of a PC board with a bunch of copper triangles, and they go in and out of a magnetic field here. These are magnets right here. Next slide. This experiment was simple enough that I could duplicate it, and that's where Joe and I started collaborating on various experiments. This is what you just saw up there. What Joe found was that within the pyramid, within these little triangles here, a force field is developed around each triangle, and he's able to measure this. We've done a lot of tests on it. And this little force field is opaque to all local forces. It's opaque to gravity, magnetism, electrostatics, ionized forces, as well as nuclear forces from nuclear material that's fissioning. The other thing is that there's a force field that builds up all around the outside. and we've been able to measure that. And we've also used some of this clairvoyant stuff as people as an instrument. And he had Bill Cox, who was one of the top dowsers in the world. Cox has gone around and dowsed and developed some of the most dramatic finds of water and various other minerals and things. A lot of the water that's in Southern California are from wells that Joe Cox dowsed. Joe Cox came up with the same field, and the clairvoyants that I used also saw the same thing. Next slide. Now remember, I'm just using these clairvoyants as instruments. You know, it's another way of verifying effects, because a lot of this stuff, we have no way of leading ourselves into this without getting some inspiration in some way. And people that can see these energies can be used as instruments to help you refine your physical experiments. And that's what I've done, and Joe's done that to a certain extent to validate things. This is Joe's experimental setup. His particular experiment is these are aluminum stanchions here, and you saw that mine are made out of wood. The other aspect of the experiment at that time was we were using an electrostatic generator here that generates negative ions, and it feeds this force field and makes it more intense, so it makes it more easy. We've since replaced this with specific frequencies of sound, which also trigger the force fields. Next slide. This is my experiment. You can see the experiment setting on a scale. The whole experiment, my experiment weighs about 1,100 grams or 1,200 grams. Joe's weighs, I think, 1,800 grams. The little wheel here inside of here, mine weighs about 11 grams. And we've seen 800 to 1,200 grams of weight loss momentarily. And what happens is this scale here is a very accurate scale to 1/10 of a gram. And it puts out, it's a computerized scale, puts out a serial interface. You could hook a computer to it, but what we've done is we've converted the serial interface into a pulse. And the scale can be programmed to upset at various weights. And we've set this up to be to get an upset at 5 grams. So if you get an upset of 5 grams, which happens within a few milliseconds, this signal will turn off and generate a pulse down here in the pulse counter. And that's what we do, is we count the pulses, which are the greater than 5 gram weight jumps. Next slide. As I mentioned, we've moved to a sound triggering of the force fields. It's just a simple power supply driving a signal generator and driving speakers. You got a little 7-watt amplifier here that we got from Jamico. The most interesting part about this is the frequency. Joe ran experiments for about a year and a half, stepping at 1/10 of a hertz through the sonic spectrum, starting at about 10 hertz. It's 10 cycles per second. And it turns out that when he hit the angle, the frequency of 51.2 hertz, which happens to be the base angle of the Great Pyramid, this thing started having more antigravitic phenomena. And that's how we create the force fields now, is using that particular frequency. And what we're doing is we're looking for a couple of other frequencies. Joe works for a company that did a little bit of, I guess they did a little experiment for him, or computerized modeling. They modeled the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid and found out that there were about 3 or 4 other resonant frequencies of the Great Pyramid King's Chamber. And that's how he was kind of going through, was he knew that somewhere in the spectrum of the Great Pyramid resonance of that chamber, or at least he theorized, this would be the frequency that this thing would trigger at. And that's what he found, was that there's a couple other frequencies. Next slide. Now you think this is probably screwy and airy-fairy and everything else. Well, Joe lives in California. I live down here in southern Arizona, and we've been running our experiments continuously over a long period of time. Here's Joe's experiment is the blue and mine's the pink. And if you look at this, there's a correlation over time. This was during the most heavy period of anti-gravity phenomena. It was from the 11th, around the 11th of December, we got a big hit. And then up here around first part of January. And you can see that both of these correlate very well. Because of the difference in latitude and longitude, the signals are slightly skewed, because as the Earth moves around the sun, what we're tuning into we think is one of the star systems. Next slide. The heaviest concentration of energy, occurs right here around December 12th through the 16th, and also around June. There are also some other concentrations of antigravitic phenomena where you see these others. What this is the sun in the center, and this is the Earth as it moves around in its orbit around the sun. Of course, the orbit is really elliptical, but this is a stylized view of actually the way it's set up. Next slide. Now you might ask, where is everything situated when this happens? It turns out that these three little stars here down in the tip of the sword of Orion, the constellation Orion, is what we're pointing at that particular time. Next slide. Now we were wondering, what's going on out there? Is there something we're tuning into? Well, it turns out that in a book by Alan Alford, Gods of the New Millennium, he puts this little graph in here, and it turns out that back in 2450 BC, as well as about 12,000 BC, these three stars in the sword of Orion's belt were lined up perfectly with the three pyramids on the plateau of Giza. Again, a correlation with the pyramid. Remember, it ties up right here with these. Next slide. So what does this look from a galactic point of view, so to speak? Here's the sun, here's the Earth when it's around December, and here's those three stars perfectly lined up. Next slide. This is a little bit of speculative engineering. I call it the Grav-Car proposal. And it turns out that if you do the mathematics of the amount of energy increase that Joe was getting with the original centrifuge and some of the other phenomena that's been happening with these experiments, you could theoretically build a device which would act as an anti-gravity lifter. And the way this thing would work is that you'd have some kind of a wheel with pyramids mounted on the end of it, and they would move between magnets. But what we'd do is we'd orient these pyramids in a vertical fashion. And if you do this with three of these rotors with, I think it's 24 pyramids per rotor and three of the rotors, you'll get about 2,000 pounds of lift. So theoretically, you could build yourself a small anti-gravity device, and we've been trying to get people to try the experiment. Next slide. Fundamental anti-gravity discovery by Joe Parr. The Earth moves through energy conduits. We call these, what we think is there's energy fields that go from our sun to other star systems, and that the Earth moves through these conduits, and this energy that we move through causes this silly little experiment to go anti-gravitic. Right now we're moving at attempts to simulate these energy conduits, because if we can control and generate these conduits in the lab, then we do have an anti-gravity device that's useful. And of course, that's one of the big things we're after. So there is something useful that could come out of all this BS. Next slide. Speculation. One of the things, if you've ever read Alan Alford's book, he brings out all kinds of really interesting correlations with ancient sites throughout the world. And these sites all have various phenomena and artifacts and things that lead us to believe that there was at one time in the Earth's history a very advanced civilization, or maybe several advanced civilizations on the planet at that time. And I've been over there and personally visited the Great Pyramids as well as a lot of the other ancient sites. And just going to the Great Pyramid itself, I'm convinced that, and if you study all of the mathematics of the pyramid, that there was at least one advanced civilization that built that thing. I mean, it's just unbelievable the size of those stones, you know, how close together they are still after 10,000 years. It's really a phenomenon. You know, like there's a big stone in Baalbek that was taken out of the quarry and getting ready to be put in this big temple they were building that weighs 11,000 tons. 11,000 tons. There isn't anything we've got today that could move that stone, and yet they had moved it out of this quarry. Next slide. As far as the shape power discovery goes, we've discovered how the universal ether can be modified by shape, which is really atoms in specific configurations. And Joe's made this monumental discovery of the correlation of shape with anti-gravity. Next slide. Another aspect, I'm just going to touch on this lightly, is the atomic nucleus. We've come up with a new model, doing some studies of different people. Next slide. Next slide. And we've got the math to break all this out. It's part of that chapter in the shape power book, that the various particles like protons and electrons are really stable particles within the ether itself. And has anybody ever seen a smoke ring? Well, a smoke ring is a fairly stable particle. It's a macro particle that's made out of smoke, and because of the flow of the air through it and things, it stays as a shape for quite a while. It turns out if you spin the ether at the speed of light, which is what the math shows, and the ether goes flowing through it, you get a stable particle. And the other thing about the math is that we can derive all of the characteristics of protons and hydrogen and neutrons, the whole 9 yards. And we can expand this model out, and it's been done by these other researchers that are working on this stuff, to describe the entire periodic table much more completely than is done with current physics. Next slide. This is just a stylized view showing the various forces. Here's the current ring, which is, of course, having a magnetic field coming out the center of it, the B field. And the current I moves at the speed of light. And because of the way, and it also twists on itself, you get the ether being pumped through it. Remember if I take you back to the very first discussions of shape power, how the atoms are having the ether flowing in and out of it. This is the stylized view of it. This particular strange-looking thing here was the particle that John Keeley postulated is the basic atom for hydrogen. And that, in fact, fits with modern physics and with this model. Next slide. So the new atomic model, what does it give us? The ether is modeled again as a hydrodynamic fluid. We can show the proton, electron are toroids rotating. A toroid is like a donut. Donut's a special case of a toroid. Rotation is the speed of light. Magnetism is mathematically the curl of the ether, if you're into the math. This is the math part of it, so you can go to sleep for a minute if you don't know math. The elemental charge is mathematically the local divergence of the ether field. The current is the rate of change of the charge mass itself. Gravity is mathematically the gradient of the ether density. And what you can do is you can derive all the atomic constants from this model, which modern physics can't do. We can derive the permittivity of free space, the permeability of free space, the gravitational constant, Planck's constant, elemental charge, and the Rydberg constant. And there's a number of other things that are derivable from this that modern physics can't do either. Next slide. So a summary of the new atomic model. We can derive the atomic constants, derive the physical constants. They're derivable by formula. We understand the gravity, the electrostatic force, the magnetism. It explains the whole atomic table. In other words, this is a unified field theory when you really get down into it. I didn't invent it. I just put together a few of the ideas from a couple of researchers and tied the math together. One of them is teetering on the idea of accepting the ether, and the other guy derived the basic particles from ether hydrodynamics. So when you put these two together, you got a total theory. Next slide. I'd like to thank everybody for hearing this crazy mad scientist stuff. And God bless all you. That particular pattern down there at the bottom is a shape power device which is radiating all the colors of the rainbow into this room. That's it. Thank you. Questions? Yes, sir. You don't have one? Well, gee, you shouldn't have slept so much.
Sir, I have a question for
Yes,
you.
sir.
How do you explain the radionic shapes that, do you see any merit in radionics? And I've seen a book where they show different geometric patterns, and they, I suppose, project a frequency that deals with certain maladies.
Okay. Radionics is kind of a derivation of combining electronics with radiant energy therapy, and it was discovered back in the early part of this century. And basically what they do is they use these frequency, supposedly these devices can tune into the frequency of various atoms and maladies and everything on the etheric spectrum, so to speak. And I'm not sure how this relates to shape power, other than the fact that everything has vibration, has pattern, and has force associated with it. So that your thought, your feeling, your physical body, crystals, the entire physical universe has all kinds of different levels of radiation associated with it. And supposedly these radionic devices can tune into it, and they can also be used to project shapes and patterns and things to correct maladies. And there's a fair amount of research to show that it does work. Of course, it's not accepted by modern medical establishment, but if it works, you know, why not? Now, any others? Yes, sir. Could you stand up to the mic? They like to get this on tape, all these wonderful words.
On the pyramid centrifuge, have you done any research relative to the magnetic field strength? And do the triangles actually touch each other that rotate?
No, yeah, we have done research on that. The triangles cannot touch each other. If it does, it grounds the entire experiment out. It appears that the triangle has to be a resonant structure within itself. And the magnetic field strength on the small pyramid is 100 Gauss across the little triangles. Okay, if you get, that's a good question. What he asked was, what happens if you increase the magnetic field? Well, I'm one of these people that say, well, if X is good, maybe 10X is better. So what I did was I built this little gravity wheel experiment here with 400 Gauss magnets. These little guys here are 400, were 400 Gauss. And I wasn't getting hardly any results from the thing, so Joe said, I don't understand it. I'm getting, you know, umpteen thousand pulses in a day when the energy conduit comes through, and I was only getting maybe 40 or 50 or 100. So Joe said, well, send it over here and let me take a look at it. And so he put his field measuring device on here, and he says, well, your magnets are too strong. So what he did was he moved them further apart just to reduce the field, and of course it started working. So when he sent it back, I put the less powerful magnets in it. That's a really good question. High magnetic fields, high electrostatic fields will blank out this phenomenon. Yes, sir.
The new form of matter that they've discovered, the microclusters, buckyballs.
Oh yeah.
The mathematics of that. How does it fit in with the unified field theory that you've postulated? And also, there are also some other forms, molecular forms such as ammonia, that are constantly turning inside out. You know.
Okay. Well, one of the things that the unified field theory really addresses itself to is the atomic and subatomic levels. And the shape power aspects go above the atomic level to actual aggregations of atoms themselves. And what you're talking about is standard chemistry phenomena where you have normal charge phenomena with respect to the electrons and the protons within the atomic structure itself. And so a buckyball is you know, it's a mathematically possible structure, and using special techniques they have been able to generate the buckyball, using special things. They can do it quite simply now. So that's how it relates, I think. What was your other question?
There are molecules.
Oh, the ammonia,
Yeah,
right.
ammonia.
Yeah, this is just standard chemistry phenomena that's going on. Nothing exotic. Any other questions? Oh, you want to see the little shape, Yeah, what this is I guess I should have pointed out each aspect of the experiment, but this is a little DC motor that's capable of, at 12 volts, of 10,000 RPM, I think it is. But we've got it scaled down so it runs at 3,500 RPM, so you don't need quite as much voltage on it. Runs on a standard shaft. You can use about anything you want. It doesn't seem to make any difference. We've tried different materials. It makes, just does it. The shaft spins, goes. These are magnets in here, and if you put a magnetometer on here, they go north-south, south-north, all the way around. So what happens is the teeth wheels here move in and out of a magnetic field, and there's twice as many teeth as there are pairs of magnets. It's a pretty simple device. Yes, Ron? No, they're north-south. Yeah, they're. Yeah, they alternate the other way. Right. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's the implication, is that, but what he's talking about is this 11,000-ton stone that's at Baalbek in Lebanon. And he was asking, is this kind of an anti-gravity phenomenon? Do they hook something to it and make it move around? Yeah, that's kind of the supposition, is that they had some way of creating an anti-gravity field, or possibly changing the gravity effects of the atoms within the device, within the big block of stone itself, so that they could move it around. And there was a lot of experiments, not experiments, there was an ancient papyrus that was uncovered in Egypt, and it showed these priests taking a wet papyrus and putting it on each side of one of these big stones and rubbing it and creating like music or something, and they showed them moving these stones, just pushing them. And these stones, some of them weigh 10, 12, 20 tons, 25 tons, some of them it's that big. So, yeah, there's something there. If you go to visit the Great Pyramid, or even the Lebanon, see those stones, it's really unbelievable. I haven't seen the one in Lebanon, but the ones at the pyramid are fantastic.
There's another theory about that. They have taken the stone and dissolved in material with oxalic acid from rhubarb and other plants.
Uh-huh.
Took the material and wet cement and
Poured them back, yeah. Yeah, I've heard that also. There's not any evidence for that, though.
Only the chemical composition that they made of stone quarry and the pyramid, and the only difference is once there is chemical, there is a substance added that needs to point to oxalic acid in there.
Okay, well, if you'd seen the shape of the Great Pyramid, not the physical shape, but the condition that it's in, sitting there in all of this air pollution and everything in Egypt, I wouldn't trust any chemical studies that have been done on that rock.
So the information on the web is that they used a very basic, they added some hydroxide, somehow brought the pH up high. In fact, they're building cement now with 6 times the structural strength of concrete,
Yeah.
using a very high pH.
Well, it's possible,
Lasts a long time.
Yeah.
Very hard.
That's possible. I don't know. I wasn't there when they did it. At least I don't remember being there. Question, sir?
Yes, in any of your research, have you noticed any differences in the different types of pyramids, four-sided and five-sided shapes?
No. Essentially, what you want to do is you want to get these converging lines going together to create that magnetic field. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the triangles are on both sides of the disc. Have you tried eliminating maybe 3, 4, 5 sets of triangles?
No.
Did you get an effect of 2 over the 1?
The only difference between the centrifuge experiment and this gravity wheel experiment is the fact that these are just triangles, and on the centrifuge we actually had 3-dimensional pyramids. So that was, you know, 4-sided with the base being glued to that balsa arm that you saw. Yes, sir.
On your device, when it's operating, have you tried to pick up any voltage off the copper pyramids through like a cat whisker type brush hooked up to a meter to register any type of voltage potential?
That's really a good question. We've done some experiments where we've tried to isolate what's going on around the triangles themselves, and because it's a single-dimensional structure, it doesn't lend itself very well to that. If you put any kind of a collector on here, a brush like you're talking about, a cat whisker, what it does is it damps the thing out, and we get nothing. You just get an electrostatic charge built up because of the cat whisker or brush rubbing against the copper plates. But an interesting part about that is that the centrifuge itself, which used these little 1-inch base 3D pyramids on the end of that arm that went around, Joe Parr has put gamma sources in there and put a Geiger counter on the outside, and he can measure the attenuation of the bubble or the force field of energy around the pyramid. And during these special times of the year, that little force field goes totally opaque to all local forces. It goes opaque to gravity, electrostatics, magnetism, you name it. Anything you stick in there, any kind of a radiator or whatever, it's totally opaque to it. It's a good question. Yes, sir. The question was, regard to the Eros maze, can I explain how it works? No, I can't. I can speculate what's happening. I think if you look closely at the maze, you'll notice that it's really a spiral that spirals inward. And that was kind of why I did that interesting experiment with the plane with all of those spirals spiraling all around it. But as far as the way it works, I really don't know. It helps to line it up north-south and a few things like that. You know, the input of if you tuck the spiral and put it in this way, as long as this is north-south, where the field's going into the maze is when it works. But it points to some possible ways of generating power using, you know, shapes. I mean, the fact that it burned the center of that thing is phenomenal, and then it threw the breaker several times in the apartment. Any other questions?
You've been talking about gravity, and I'm not a scientist, but I've talked with people that say that this gravity is a very flawed concept, and that we're not held down by gravity, but we're pushed down by magnetics.
That's really a good explanation, because if you look at the mathematics and the physics of everything that's going on with respect to the atomic particles, this ether flowing in and out, it turns out that the force of gravity is not a force by itself. It's the result of the ether, or the magnetism, vortexing, which is a magnetic force, flowing down through the mass and causing the mass to be heavy. And so the local stress, or the local flow of the ether, is from the outside of the Earth toward the center and back out through the South Pole. It goes in through the North Pole as well as through the atomic structure of the planet. And so there's a local stress within the zero-point energy field, or the ether itself, and that's what makes you heavy. Now, if you could reverse the stress around you, you could go floating off and levitating and doing all kinds of neat things. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Well, that doesn't fit in with the theory too good, because if you just shield yourself from it, your atoms are still pulling in ether. What you'd have to do is you have to change the local stress on all those atoms so that they would want to go someplace.
How about providing a total force that would redirect it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Let's say that here I am with this energy flowing through me, and the reason it's flowing down through me this way is because the local stress in the zero-point energy field is going down in this direction. So all of this energy that's going through the atoms is now going down through this way. Now, if I can change the direction of that stress, if I can turn it around, then I'm going to head off into outer space. Hopefully I got an air tank to breathe, right? Yes, sir. Not that we know of. I'm getting told I got to shut up here and quit, so been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope it helped you out in some way.